The world has a strange way of judging people. We draw lines in the sand, paint with broad strokes, and often we miss the heart beating beneath the surface, especially when that surface is covered in leather, tattoos, and the grime of the open road. This is a story about assumptions, about the kind of cruelty that hides behind a veneer of respectability, and about what happens when the very people society labels as villains decide to step up and become the unexpected, roaring heroes. In the quiet, seemingly perfect suburb of Silverwood lived a man named Arthur Hayes. Arthur was what the community called upstanding. He wore tailored suits, drove a spotless luxury sedan, and sat on the local council. He had a perfect lawn, a large, intimidating fence, and a disposition that was as cold and hard as the polished marble in his foyer. He was, by all accounts, a pillar of the community, except for one glaring, terrifying detail. He was a terror to his own family, specifically to his 6-year-old step-grandson, Leo. Leo was a small, fragile boy, with eyes that looked too old for his face, constantly reflecting a deep-seated fear. His mother, Clara, Arthur's daughter-in-law, was trapped. After her husband passed away unexpectedly, she and Leo were forced to move in with Arthur, who controlled everything: the finances, the house, and the narrative. Arthur didn't believe in tears, nor did he believe in Leo. Every small mistake, every childish whim, was met with harsh, chilling ridicule. It wasn't physical abuse, not in the way the law defines it, but it was a calculated, soul-crushing emotional torment that left deeper scars than any punch. One sweltering afternoon, Leo was trying to retrieve his favorite faded blue ball that had rolled just under Arthur's prize-winning rosebush. In his haste and fear, Leo tripped, knocking over a fragile clay planter. The sound of the shattering pottery was immediately followed by Arthur's booming, icy voice from the veranda. "Leo, what have you done, you careless brat?" Arthur didn't move. He simply watched from his shaded vantage point, a cruel smirk spreading across his face as the boy froze, his small chest heaving with silent, terrified sobs. Leo tried to stammer an apology, tears finally streaming down his dusty cheeks. Arthur didn't offer comfort or patience. Instead, he pulled out his phone, clearly recording the child's distress, and let out a single, loud, barking laugh. "Look at him, Clara, crying over a pot, just like a girl. Get inside and clean up your mess, you little mistake. And don't stop crying until you're completely silent. I don't want to hear another sound." That laugh, that sound of pure, unadulterated contempt directed at a helpless, weeping child, was the catalyst. It was the sound that tipped the scales and drew the attention of people who usually preferred to remain unseen: the Bandidos MC. The Bandidos, or Bandidos Nation, are known globally. Their patches, their colors, their reputation as 1%ers precedes them. They are not heroes in the headlines, they are the shadows, the outlaws. They ride hard, they live by their own code, and that code is rigid and unforgiving. But there's a vital part of that code that the respectable world conveniently ignores: a deep, fiercely protective loyalty to the vulnerable, especially children. They see themselves as protectors of the marginalized, and to them, a rich man tormenting a small child is the lowest form of cowardice. The club had a few eyes in the community: a mechanic, a bartender, a few people who understood that Arthur Hayes's respectability was paper-thin. A retired construction worker, an old veteran known simply as Dusty, lived 2 streets over and had witnessed several smaller, unsettling incidents involving Arthur and Leo. But when Dusty saw the video, the clear, mocking laughter aimed at a child, he didn't hesitate. He sent the footage straight up the chain to the local chapter president, a massive man with a quiet demeanor and eyes that missed nothing, known only as Hammer. Hammer watched the 10-second clip 3 times. His face, usually a canvas of stone-cold indifference, tightened. He didn't see a rich man teaching a lesson. He saw a predator enjoying the suffering of the innocent. That was a line. The next morning, Silverwood woke up to a sound that usually belonged on a distant highway, not their manicured streets: the deep, resonant rumble of dozens of high-displacement V-twin engines. It wasn't just a few bikes, it was a mobilization. Word had gone out to neighboring chapters. This wasn't a fight. This was a statement. This was a rescue mission disguised as a show of force. 60 bandidos, maybe more, rolled slowly but deliberately into Arthur Hayes's cul-de-sac. They were a unified, intimidating wave of chrome and black leather. Each one wore their colors, the distinctive fat Mexican patch, and they moved with the disciplined, unsettling precision of a military unit. They were silent, the only sound the throbbing pulse of their engines. They stopped directly in front of Arthur's pristine house. Hammer, riding a custom Harley that looked more like a tank, led the charge. He stopped precisely where Leo's ball had rolled, and 60 motorcycles followed suit, forming an impenetrable, unmoving wall. They didn't park on the street. They angled their bikes. Every single one of them, 60 roaring machines, effectively blocked Arthur Hayes's entire freshly paved driveway. He was going nowhere. Inside the house, Arthur was preparing for his morning golf game, oblivious. Clara and Leo were eating breakfast in strained silence. The sudden, earth-shaking rumble brought Clara to the window. Her jaw dropped. She saw the wall of bikers, their patches unmistakable. Terror warred with a strange, nascent hope. Arthur, furious at the disturbance, stormed to the door, throwing it open, ready to unleash his usual torrent of privileged outrage. He stopped dead. The sight was overwhelming. 60 grim-faced, formidable men, radiating power and silent menace. Hammer, still seated on his bike, simply looked at Arthur, his helmet hiding his expression, but his presence screaming authority. "What in the blazes do you think you're doing? This is private property. I'm calling the police," Arthur stammered, his voice losing its usual venom, replaced by a desperate, high-pitched tremor. Hammer raised a gloved hand, silencing him instantly. The engine rumble held steady, a deep, constant threat. He slowly pulled out his phone and played the video, amplifying the audio through a small portable speaker mounted on his handlebars. The sound of Arthur's cruel, mocking laugh echoed unnervingly down the quiet street. The silence that followed the replay of Arthur's laughter was heavier than the rumble of the engines. It hung in the air, thick with accusation, amplified by the 60 pairs of eyes fixed on the respectable man in the tailored golf attire. Arthur Hayes, the pillar of the community, felt his composure crumble. The audacity of these outlaws, this riffraff, to confront him on his own property, using his own cruelty against him, was unbearable. "Get that filth off my property, you're trespassing. I'll have you all arrested," Arthur shouted, regaining a shaky fraction of his bluster. He looked down the street, hoping for a neighbor, a patrol car, anyone who would validate his indignation. But Silverwood's residents were glued to their windows, silently watching the unprecedented spectacle. Many of them had suspected Arthur's coldness, but none had dared to challenge it. Now, the challenge had arrived on two wheels. Hammer finally spoke, his voice surprisingly calm, deep, and carrying easily over the idling V-twins. "The police will be here soon enough, Arthur. We called them ourselves. Not for trespassing, but for what you're doing to that boy." He gestured toward the house with his chin. "You find joy in making a child cry. That's not a man, that's a sickness. And sickness needs treatment." Arthur scoffed. "He's my step-grandson. I have the right to discipline him. It's called parenting, something you clearly know nothing about, you gang of thugs." At that moment, the front door of Arthur's house slowly opened. Clara, pale but resolute, stepped out, holding Leo close to her side. Leo looked out at the sea of leather and chrome, not with the expected fear, but with a wide-eyed, tentative curiosity. He recognized the sound of the bikes as the source of the interruption, the pause in the constant tension of his life. Hammer's focus shifted from Arthur to Clara and the boy. He cut his engine. The ensuing silence was startling. 59 other engines immediately followed suit. The street went from a throbbing roar to near absolute quiet, broken only by the distant rising wail of sirens. "Clara!" Hammer called out, using her name without asking. "We know why you're here. We know he controls the money, the house. We know you're trapped. We didn't come for a fight. We came for a rescue." He dismounted his bike, a massive, imposing figure now standing on Arthur's immaculate lawn. He walked toward Clara and Leo, and not a single one of the 60 men moved, their eyes locked, maintaining the intimidating perimeter. Arthur started forward, intending to stop Hammer, but two burly bandidos dismounted and silently stepped between him and the president, their presence an immediate, non-negotiable wall. Hammer crouched down on one knee, maintaining distance, careful not to overwhelm Leo. He removed his helmet, revealing a scarred but kind face, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He wasn't looking at Clara. He was looking directly at the little boy. "Hey, buddy," Hammer said softly, his voice a surprising contrast to his size. "My name is Hammer. You like motorcycles?" Leo, hiding mostly behind his mother's skirt, nodded shyly, his tears long dried. "Me too. We all like bikes. You know, sometimes the people who look the meanest are actually the ones who want to help the most," Hammer continued, his gaze drifting pointedly toward Arthur, who was sputtering in the background. "Sometimes, the biggest bullies are the ones who wear the nicest clothes and have the nicest houses." Clara watched this exchange, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, hope igniting in her chest. Hammer then turned his attention back to Clara. "The police are coming. The Child Protective Services are also aware. We've compiled all the videos, all the witness statements, including the one from Dusty down the street. We have secured the legal resources you need. You are not trapped anymore, Clara. He controls the house and the money, but he doesn't control your freedom." He stood up and pulled a thick, official-looking manila envelope from an inner pocket of his vest and handed it to Clara. "Inside is the contact for an attorney. A good one. Fully funded. We do a lot of good works the newspapers don't talk about. You take Leo, you walk out that door, you call this lawyer, you let us handle the show here." Arthur, recognizing the serious legal threat, finally understood the gravity of the situation. His face went from rage to a panicked, calculated fear. "Clara, don't you dare. If you walk out that door, you get nothing. You'll be on the street." Clara looked at Arthur, the man who laughed at her crying child, and then down at Leo's small, trusting face, now gazing up at the giant leather-clad man who had just spoken to him with more gentleness than Arthur ever had. Her decision was instant. She clutched the envelope, took Leo's hand, and walked straight past Arthur and toward the curb. As they reached the end of the driveway, the bandidos parted their formation just enough to allow Clara and Leo to pass through the line of bikes. 60 men, who lived their lives outside of society's rules, watched them go, as Clara and Leo walked down the street, heading toward a new, uncertain but free future. 60 engines simultaneously roared back to life, not in threat, but in a final, deafening salute. It was the sound of 60 men letting the world know that these two were under their protection, that they were safe. The police arrived moments later, finding 60 silent, heavily armed bikers blocking a man's driveway, with a stack of evidence ready to be presented. They were outlaws, yes, but today they were the evidence gatherers, the protectors, the quiet, chrome-plated hand of justice. Arthur Hayes was quickly consumed by the legal battle that followed, losing his grip on Clara and Leo, his reputation permanently tarnished. The bandidos didn't stick around for the arrests or the thank yous. As quickly and deliberately as they arrived, they left, melting back onto the highway, the heroes disappearing into the wind, their good deed noted not by any official record, but by a small, brave boy who finally knew the difference between a real villain and a silent, leather-clad protector. He realized that the greatest heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear colors.